Saul Khan is here. He's the founder of KhanAcademy.org. He provides 10-minute tutorials on the web on everything from math to science to finance. The Harvard MBA and former hedge fund manager has become an online teaching sensation. His videos have been viewed more than 50 million times worldwide. They have been translated to more than 7 different languages. Here is a look.
So the hypotenuse is now going to be 5. This animal's fossils are only found in this area of South America, a nice clean band here, and this part of Africa. We could integrate over the surface, and the notation usually is a capital sigma. National Assembly, they create the Committee of Public Safety, which sounds like a very nice committee. Some cells have a membrane around the DNA. This is called a nucleus. Notice this is an aldehyde, and it's an alcohol. Start differentiating into effector and memory cells. A galaxy. Hey, there's another galaxy. And for dollars, is there 30 million plus the $20 million from the American manufacturer? If these things end up being worth 30 cents on the dollar, let's say that we go to some future state and these really are worth only 30 cents, the most that the private investor loses in this situation is his $7. If this does not blow your mind, then you have no emotion.
I am pleased to have Saul Khan at this table for the first time. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So what am I just looking at? I'm looking at someone who's interested in everything and has a passion to tell others.
I think so. Yeah, that's what I've turned into, I guess.
What have you turned into?
Yeah, I've turned into someone, I guess from my point of view, who gets to, I started off with the math and the physics and the science and the economics, stuff that I knew fairly well from my background. But now I've turned into someone who gets to learn pretty much anything and distill it down and teach it.
Yeah,
and,
you're learning new things, assimilating them, distilling them, and then teaching them.
Yeah.
So give me the background that you have.
Well, I was, as you'd mentioned, 5-6 years ago, I was an analyst at a hedge fund. Right. Before that, my background was in software. Then I went to business school, did the hedge fund thing. I started in Boston. And while I was in Boston, I had family visiting me from New Orleans. This was right after my wedding. This was in 2004. And my cousin, Nadia, I remember we were waiting for the fireworks over the Charles River, and we were just killing time. And I started giving these brain teasers, the type of brain teasers you'd give at like a software interview for 25-year-old engineering. And most people just disengage, like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to think right now. But Nadia, here's a 12-year-old. She was like, oh, don't tell me the answer. I need to figure it out. Okay, can they see each other? And all these type of things about the brain teaser. And I was pretty impressed. And I started telling her and her mother, hey, you should think about becoming an engineer or whatever. And the next morning, her mom, Nusrat Auntie, told me, thanks for believing in Nadia, but she's actually being tracked into a slower math class, like the non-advanced track. And I said, that's impossible. The stuff she was doing yesterday is way beyond her. She's clearly a bright girl. And she's like, no, I think she did bad on a placement exam. And so when Nadia woke up, I said, what's going on? And she said, no, apparently she had bombed units, converting, gallons to quarts and all that. I was like, Nadia, I can understand how that can be confusing, but the stuff you're doing last night was way deeper and way harder than units. And if you're willing to work with me, when you go back to New Orleans and I'll stay here in Boston, I think we can get you past whatever hurdles you have. And she agreed, and they went back to New Orleans, and every day after work, I would come home and we'd get on the speakerphone for about half an hour, and I'd start working with her. And it worked out. 2-3 months, she got up to speed, went ahead of the curve. Then I started tutoring her brothers, other family members. And then you fast forward to 2006. So it's about 18 months have gone by. And I was venting to a buddy. I was like, this is a lot of fun I'm having. And by this time, I had moved out to California. And I was like, this is a lot of fun. It's really satisfying. But the first time you give a lecture on least common multiples, it's kind of fun. The second time is still fun, a little more polished. The third time, it starts to get a little bit tiring to do. And he said,
do it one time.
Do it one time. Why don't you put it on YouTube?
Right.
And I said, no, YouTube's for dogs on skateboards. It's not for serious learning. And once I got over the fact that it wasn't my idea, I decided to give it a shot, and I put it up there. Now,
which one did you put up there?
It was either least common multiple or greatest common divisor. I forget. I think I did them on the same day, that first day. And the cool thing about YouTube is you can sort by upload time. So that first video you'd shown, that was one of the early videos. I kind of cringed. I was like, oh, that's when I wasn't using the fancy HD stuff. But yeah, it was on one of those topics.
And the reaction?
You know what? At about 20 or 30 up there, my cousin's initial reaction, and I joke about this, but it's true, is that they preferred me on YouTube than in person. I'll take that for what it's worth, but it made sense.
You need not come to the next family gathering. Just send us.
Yeah, there wasn't. Sal can be annoying sometimes.
So and then when did it become Khan Academy?
You fast forward. It soon became clear, like maybe 6 months, even from the beginning, random people started watching it. But then fast forward 6 months, I probably had 50 or 100 videos. And I started getting these random letters from people just on YouTube. And if you look on YouTube, people aren't always that civil on YouTube in terms of what they write. But for the most part, everyone's writing, hey, thanks a bunch, this helped me. And then some people would write, I was going to flunk calculus until I got this video. Or I was going to drop out of, I wasn't going to become an engineer because I couldn't handle the course load until I saw that video on vectors or whatever it might be. And so it started to dawn on me that this could be more than a hobby, although it stayed a hobby right then. And I think the first time Khan Academy came about, I think it was either 2007, I decided to set up my own domain name and so have another way of viewing the videos. And I also started working on the software for my cousins, so I could give them problems and give them exercises. And I put it all on that site. And I was working for a hedge fund called Wohl Capital, and my boss was Dan Wohl. And I said, well, I'm Sal Khan, so I'll call it Khan Academy. That's it.
And so what are your dreams? What do you want it to be?
If I and I used to be kind of quiet about this dream because it seemed kind of like a crazy thing. Maybe even last year it would have seemed crazy for me to say what I'm about to say. But now I think there's a potential for, right now online learning, no one takes it they take it seriously. They think it has value, but they don't. Online learning is here, and your prestigious universities are over here. They're not in the same conversation. I'm hoping Khan Academy can turn into an institution that, I don't want to say rivals, but it's talked in the same conversation as some of these things that have been around for hundreds of years.
In the places where you can learn.
In the places where you can learn at a very high level. So you can start at arithmetic, but you can go deep, and it's a real learning experience. It's not something superficial.
So how many people work for you now?
We have 8 people. We just have 8. We had 6 if you'd asked last week.
And so eventually you'll give diplomas?
That's an open question, and this is, if you focus just on K through 12, and our video content goes well beyond K through 12, but just on K through 12, right now what really matters is some of these standardized tests, the SATs, the AP tests, and high school diplomas. Kids are getting into Harvard based on just being homeschooled right now, and so we see our real niche right now on the learning side. Standard education is really learning and credentialing. And we're going to tackle the learning as well as we can. And in the future, we'll see what we can do on the credentialing side.
You've got a remarkable group of people who believe what you're doing. People from Google, Bill Gates, and a lot of others, have cited you for what you have done and what you are doing. Is there any pushback from what you have accomplished? Does anybody say, yes, but? My sense of the pushback is sometimes these articles get written where the article itself is fairly balanced and reasonable, but they'll title it like, "Will Khan Academy demolish traditional education?" Where was this one?
Oh, I don't know. I'm okay. There was one that recently came out. Will it flip the classroom or turn education upside down? There was something like that. Right. So there are these headlines that are very attention grabbing.
Right.
And so I think when someone reads that, they've become cynical about these panacea solutions to a big problem, and so they might say, "Oh no, there's no way that something like this could solve all of our problems." But for the most part, I think when people understand what they're doing, it's we haven't gotten a lot of resistance.
And who are the people who are watching?
It's, and that's the surprising thing, who's watching, is when I started off, it was for my cousins, and I kind of just made them for, my cousins they wanted to learn. I was there as kind of their big brother type figure, and so I was motivating them. And when I make the videos, I'm kind of like, well, if I wanted to learn this subject, what would I want? How would I want it to be explained? Right. And I thought that it would appeal to a certain subset of people, people who like to watch, the Discovery Channel and Charlie Rose and all the rest. But so I'm really focused on the intuition and the going deep and showing how it connects and all of these things that sometimes get lost in textbooks in some classes. The surprising thing is I get letters from that group of people, but I do get letters from parents of students with learning disabilities, kids who were otherwise disengaged from the math class or from school generally, and then over here they all of a sudden discover a love.
So that is the most important question that come out of this conversation between the two of us. What is it what is it you do that somehow makes learning more attractive, more interesting, more satisfying, and more productive?
You know, I don't know that I definitely have the answer. I have guesses.
Well, guess for me.
Yeah. I think it's, you know, I started off making it for my cousins. And so I kind of didn't care. And I was kind of like this liberated person. If someone had told me in 2004, I'm going to give you a couple $1 million, produce something that's going to reach millions of people, and Bill Gates is going to watch it and all the rest, I probably would have produced something different. I probably would have gotten fancy lighting and put some makeup on and got some computer graphics, and probably produced a lot of the education material that's already out there. These computer graphics, the next stage of photosynthesis is when the, you know, and but I think the reality is that's what we all assume as good content, but when someone watches that, it's so dehumanizing. It's you kind of check out. You're like, that's not talking to me. And so when I made it, it was literally just me in a room. People could tell it's just some dude. He's not getting paid. Who's making it for his cousins. And so they can tell there's a human element to it. They can tell that, you know, a lot of times when people are trying to get people engaged into math, they try to distract them. They'll do like a rap song, or they'll play all this music. And I think people find that patronizing. They're like, look, don't distract me. If math is good, it should be able to stand up on its own.
That's exactly what I believe about this show. The same thing. It's a black room.
Yes.
Just a conversation between interesting people. You know?
Yeah. No,
and that's all it is, and that's what people want. They don't want a lot of
you're not
bells and
insulting
whistles.
people.
And
if you have bells and whistles, it's meaning that it's not worth watching. Yeah,
Let me say, Saul Khan is a very interesting person. If you don't know about him, you'll learn a whole lot here, and this kind of conversation will penetrate that veil of complexity. You know, and give you a channel to access complexity.
I wholeheartedly agree. Maybe I was subconsciously inspired.
No, you weren't,
by
but it is the same idea. When I hear you say it, I realize that's exactly the way we approach. That's our mindset as well. So what's the hardest thing about this?
You know,
24 hours in a day.
24 hours in a day. I think now the hardest thing is I really want me to be all about continuing to make videos. I want most of my day kind of the learning and the producing.
But what?
But and this is another interesting thing about Khan Academy, because I've put these videos out there and people watch them, and I'm kind of associated with them, and I can use that as a platform to I guess engage in the discussion, however you want to view it. But I still think my biggest role and probably the highest leverage from my time are those videos. And even though those videos, that video on line integrals in the first week might only be watched by a few hundred people, I think over the next 100 years that'll be a big impact.
Do people come to you all the time and say, "This, we can monetize this"?
They used to. So I don't know, about two or 3 years ago, when Khan Academy had gotten to a kind of people started to know about it, but I still had my day job at the hedge fund. I started, a couple of VCs approached, hey, we could do a double bottom line hybrid model, a freemium or whatever, all these things. And actually I got to meeting 2 with one of them. And meeting 1 was a lot of fun, because they're like, hey, you can make a salary to do this, and if it all works out, you're going to be rich and all of that. But then meeting 2 is like, so let's focus on this market because we can monetize this. I was like, no, but I feel like doing Civil War videos. Like, why should I do, and so meeting 2, so I said, no, and I can't, because it was just too much fun to give up the fun part of it, regardless of the upside. And so, so when so that's actually became clear when, even though I didn't know what a nonprofit kind of would entail to start and how do you raise money for it, anything, that's where it became clear that, no, I want it to be and I was like, what are all these universities? Oh, they're not-for-profits. I want to be a not-for-profit too.
So that's what you've become.
That's what we've become.
And so you get a lot of money from people like Gates or John Doerr or Ann Doerr and people like that who believe in what you do and say. Yeah.
And Ann and John were the first. Literally, I'd quit my job in 2009 and the savings started to go like this, and it was Ann in particular who really stepped up and allowed me to get the first salary, and then Google and Bill Gates and everyone else started to get involved. And
take a tangent from you for a second. What's wrong with the way we teach?
I think it's more than the way we teach. I think it's a systemic thing of how the school is structured. Right now you have, you and I were sitting in algebra class or pre-algebra class, and they're going over negative numbers, and maybe you get a 95% on the exam, you feel good about yourself, you get an A stamped on your forehead or whatever. Let's say I get a 70%, it's a C or a D. And so there's an assessment, and it does identify that I have big weaknesses. You have even some weaknesses. You had a 95%, so there's still 5% you didn't know. And negative numbers is a core thing. You need to know that really well. But despite that, the whole class then moves to the next concept and builds on. They assume that everyone had mastery when they've just shown that no one does. And so you keep marching everyone down that path, and people just keep having gaps in their knowledge. And what you have is when you get to, we've all seen this with ourselves, with family members, everyone hits a certain math class or a certain science class where they hit a wall, where all of a sudden that A student or that B student just starts flunking. They just can't, and they have good teachers, they're trying to study, and it's just they're hitting their head against the wall, and it's because they have all of these gaps. And once you're in algebra class, there's no way to identify the gap in 4th grade or identify the gap in pre-algebra. Or once you're in calculus, there's no way to identify that algebra gap. And I think that's the problem. No matter how good a teacher you have just a weak foundation.
This is Fortune, August 24th. His low-tech conversational tutorials, Khan's face never appears, and viewers see only his unadorned step-by-step doodles and diagrams on an electronic blackboard. More than merely another example of viral media distributed inexorable across to the universe, Khan Academy holds a promise of a virtual school, an educational transformation that de-emphasizes classrooms, campus, and administrative infrastructure, and even brand-name instructors. Quick, free, and easy to understand. Khan has his skeptics in the education business. They don't doubt he means well and is helping students, but they question the broad impact of any tutorial that doesn't test performance or allow student-teacher discussion. Is that a point?
It's a point.
All
points are.
More. It's a point.
It is a point. And that's
everybody's
why.
entitled to an opinion.
Or more. Or more.
Maybe two.
Maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Well, to rebut that last point is that's exactly why. We have the videos, and I keep making videos, but then as soon as we got funding, that little simple software that I started building for my cousins to measure what they knew and what they didn't know, that's why we started building it into this exercise platform. Right. And so I think over time, the videos will always be a big part of Khan Academy, but this exercise piece where students start 1 + 1, it keeps generating problems for them until they can get 10 in a row, until they master a concept. And only then move on to the next concept. That's going to become a bigger and bigger piece of it. So to rebut that, no, we are doing the assessment and the feedback.
Do you see it as supplementary to the process of education or a main line in the process of education?
Our goal, we view ourselves as in the beginning of this process.
Right.
I've been at it for 4 or 5 years, but as an organization, we've only been at it for 6 or 7 months. But our goal is that with Khan Academy alone, if there's a student in Calcutta, internet, they need an internet connection, so
right.
that's a gating factor. But if they're there, they can get a pretty solid grounding in a lot of different subject areas, especially ones that are meaningful to them that they can use to progress. Yeah. But we think it can also be the operating system of what happens in a classroom to really liberate what happens inside of a classroom.
How many of them do you do yourself?
I produced all the videos.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I'm the faculty.
You are the faculty of one.
Our meetings are very non-bureaucratic.
And so let's assume you're interested in Napoleon and the French Revolution. Yeah. What do you do? How do you prepare? What's the process of going from, I'm curious about Napoleon, to, this is what I have to teach you. This is your access to understand this moment in history. Yeah,
and so once again, I approach it from what my brain would like to see. Like, what would the ideal? And for me, in history in particular, and I don't feel like I got this in the history books, and even now when I prepare, I'm not getting it from the history books on my shelf, is like, I like to see a scaffold. I like to see a map. I like to, what is the Holy Roman Empire? Like, what is that now?
Well,
like,
the Ottoman Empire.
The Ottoman, what are these things? People can just keep referring to them, but if I can't. So I like to, so what I do is, for history, I immerse myself in as much as possible. I usually read Wikipedia entry first, just to get the scaffold.
Oh
yeah. No,
I go for the scaffold myself.
Get the scaffold,
just as a learning experience.
Just as a learning experience.
I want to see where it fits.
Exactly.
I want to see the geography of the place.
Exactly.
And what does it look like?
Exactly. And the beauty now, also Wikipedia. If I find cool maps along the way, I copy and paste. I make sure they're in the public domain. I copy and paste. Stick it on my little Blackboard art program,
right.
And sometimes I'll draw out a timeline just to make sure I get the years right. But the main thing I do, whether it's history or chemistry or anything, is get the scaffold and then really immerse myself for however long it takes, and then make sure that I can make intuitive connections between everything that happens. And and this is where,
what's that, an intuitive connection?
Understand why something, if I'm doing it on the neuron, why. A biology book will tell you, okay, the signal goes across because there's a myelin sheath. And I'm like, yeah, but how does putting a little tissue around a neuron, how does it make the signal go faster, right? And no biology book will tell you that answer. And I'd kind of ponder it a bit, and then I was like, well, it's kind of like a fiber optic system, and one's kind of amplifying the signal, but if you amplify too, and then I'd call up some buddies who are either biologists or communications engineers, whatever. I was like, does this make sense? They're like, no, I think you're right. And so it's a big deal for me to, if I'm doing biology, why does the myelin sheath make the signal go faster? If it's history, wait, why did this artillery captain all of a sudden come to power? Like weren't there other people around? Like these obvious questions are important for me to answer.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is sometimes you call a buddy and you're like, I know you're going to think I'm stupid when I ask you this, and you're probably going to think I have no business making a video on this considering I'm asking you this question, but why does the sarcoplasmic reticulum release these ions when this happens? And they're like, you know what? We don't know. And I was like, why didn't the book tell me that?
Yeah.
Like, it's so, like, it would have made, everyone would like it better.
So what do your former colleagues at the hedge funds say?
They're super happy about it. I mean, my last boss told me, if I knew you were going to do this, I wouldn't have hired you. So he would.
It's great to find this thing. It's great to find something that you have great passion for, and it involves learning yourself.
I think I've subconsciously been inspired by you. Years ago, I said Charlie Rose got the best job. Like he's just got to learn everything, and he gets to. So I'm doing it in my own way.
It's great to meet you. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Saul Khan, KhanAcademy.com.